May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom all, and welcome to our Monday night open forums. I'm, of course, your host, if I can speak correctly tonight, Ariel Tzadok. I am from KosherTorah.com, and I'm sure you already know that. But we are now going to talk about the topic of Rosh HaShana, the New Year. To time stamp us, we are right now just days away from the beginning of the high holiday period. And we all know, I'm sure, from popular idea and belief, Rosh HaShana is the beginning of the Jewish New Year. It is the time of the blowing of the shofar. It is considered the day of judgment. For those who are familiar with the traditional Jewish prayers, you say, this is the day the world was created. All life comes before the Holy One on this day. All nations, all peoples, all life. Animal, mineral, vegetable. Is there such thing as mineral life? Well, I guess you'll have to go into our Etz Chaim series on Gate 50, where we do discuss some interesting things about that. But another topic for another time. But for those of you who are, shall we say, biblical scholars, when you read in the Torah, the stories or the commandments related to the blowing of the shofar on this day, one thing that is very strikingly clear: the traditional concepts, ideas, and beliefs attributed to Rosh HaShana, being the first day of the year, being the day of judgment, is not from the Bible. Search as you will through the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. You will find no reference to a month called Tishrei. You will find no reference to the first month of this day when the shofar is blown as being a day of judgment of the world or of Israel or of anything else. It is not called the beginning of the year. Now, interestingly, while we say that this was the day the world was created, there is an interesting discussion in the Talmud, because there are actually two different opinions as when the world was created. One says the world was created in the month of Nisan, and one says the world was created on Tishrei. And the sages say that they are actually both correct, one being the creation of the physical world, one being the creation of the spiritual world. In both cases, I am certain we are not making a reference to anything actually related to physical time as we know it. But rather it is a metaphor, a symbolism, using the psychological term by Carl Jung, a myth. Now, a myth is not a make-believe thing that has no truth. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you an official psychological understanding of myth from the Carl Jung lexicon, a primer of terms and concepts by Professor Darrell Sharp, quoting from page 87, the meaning of myth, and I quote, "Myth is an involuntary collective statement based on an unconscious psychic experience." Quoting here directly from Jung, he says that the primitive mentality does not invent myth, it experiences them. Myths are an original revelation of the pre-conscious psyche. Many of these unconscious processes may be indirectly occasioned by consciousness, but never by conscious choice. Others appear to arise spontaneously, that is to say, from no discernible or demonstrable conscious cause. To take that and put it simple, what it means is this: whether or not there is any historical or literal truth to this being the time of creation is irrelevant. So therefore, to think that the world was created 5,775 years ago, give or take a couple of hours or days at this time, is a myth. It's a make-believe story. It is not historical. Whereas at the same time, it is 100% absolutely true. Give or take 163 years, as we've discussed from other courses. Now, how could something be true and not true at the same time? Well, there are all kinds of truths, aren't there? If a man looks into the eyes of his beloved bride and says, "Your eyes sparkle like the stars," is that a literal truth? I certainly hope not, because what does that mean? That the girl has radiation? What does that mean? Something wrong? No, it's poetry. That's myth. Symbolism. You see, biblically speaking, the concepts that we embrace today did not at that time exist. Our sages are very clear in the Talmud that the names of the months came out of Babylon, just like the names of the angels did. You see, God works in our world in an evolutionary developmental format, structure. Everything is in a progression of maturation, meaning growing up. When we went to Babylon, and that's like 586 BCE, all right? It's not what we lost, it's what we gained. And that is something we discussed in our series in the Torah of the Arizal, in our series on Purim, which actually echoes a lot of the teachings from here at Rosh HaShana. But you can reference that there. But of the things that our sages learned in Babel was of the powers and the abilities of astrology. Do we Jews believe in astrology? Well, yes, we do. The Bible clearly ascribes power to astrology, whereas at the same time it is emphatic that it is not a fortune-telling or a predictive type of practice. That we might go so far as to call idolatrous. Why? Because we live in a reality modern science knows today that is quantum in nature, of multiple parallel possibilities. And whenever we so want to narrow something down to a limited construct, we are literally handcuffing reality and preventing fluid movement. That's bad. To help give you a proper understanding of astrology from a Torah point of view, let me quote to you from the classic book, Derekh HaShem, The Way of God, by Rabbi Moshe Luzzatto, section 2, chapter 7. It's called Hashpa'at HaKochavim, or the influence of stars. I'm just going to read you a couple of selections here. He states that every physical phenomena has its root amongst the higher forces. First, the thing is rooted in the spiritual realm in all the necessary ways. After it is committed more and more to the material, till it finds itself in the form that it desires for it in the physical realm. It was for the sake of this process that the stars and planets were created. Through their movement and cycles, influences in the spiritual realm are transmitted and reflected to their spiritual counterparts, allowing things to exist in the material world in the physical form that was ordained for them. And it goes, there's another function that God assigned to the stars. Every event and situation in the material world is prepared and initiated on high, and then is transmitted via the stars, step by step, finally appearing in the desired physical forms below. And he gives examples of life, and wealth, and health, and yada, 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 yada. He says this is the results of the particular divisions and combinations of the stars following their specific cycles. Now, in order to understand and put astrology into a realistic sense, it's important for us to understand certain concepts in science. Number one, before we even mention science, let's take a big swipe at religion. What is religion? It's our faith, it's what we believe. But yet faith and belief are always subject to the interpretations of the individual. If we call Torah the pursuit of truth, then we have to sometimes emancipate and free the Torah from the personal opinions, the limited, narrow constructs of those who want to imprison it and handcuff it into a single or narrow meaning. That's what religion does. Religion, I hate to have to say it, but Karl Marx was right when he called religion an opiate for the masses, for the peoples. Or in other words, it's like a drug. It keeps people stupefied. It might keep them happy. It might keep them occupied and away from having to deal with the real hard things in life. And you'll find that the great Kabbalists throughout the centuries have always pretty much commented about, if you will, superficial religion being just that, superficial. That true religion is, as we know, the pursuit of truth. And in the pursuit of truth, you cannot take science and put it in opposition to religion. But on the contrary, science has to become religion. Religion is science. There's no separation. So if we want to make a religious statement about the influence of the stars, as Rabbi Luzzatto has just done, how can we understand this realistically today? Well, let's understand it realistically today. We all know that every single planet and every single star belches out cosmic rays, magnetic fields, energy of all kinds. The energy that emanates from our star, soul, our sun, goes far beyond the limitations of our solar system. Indeed, the Earth has a magnetic field which envelops us, which some believe is the conduit and avenue through which psychic telepathic powers from one mind to the other travel. But I'll get to that as we proceed. Our planet, our sun, has these cosmic waves and energies emanating from it. Well, guess what? So does every other planet, and so does every other star. When we look out to space, our physical eyes can only see within the limitations of the electromagnetic spectrum that the rods and cones in our physical vision are focused to see, from that which we call the infrared through the ultraviolet. But modern science has been able to measure countless wavelengths above and below that, and they know that the entire universe is a very, very crowded place of energy. That is science. So all of these planets, all of these stars are belching out, emanating, radiating cosmic waves. They're filling the galaxy, they're filling the universe. If we could see them, we would see them as waves bumping into each other, over others, over others, over others, all over the place. Question. While modern science does not necessarily recognize that these waves have any kind of an influence over us, we must recognize something about our own selves. We, human beings, are essentially energetic entities. We emanate waves all the time. We measure in the laboratory brain waves. We know that they exist. We can read them. We also know that we have electromagnetic energy emanating from our bodies all the time. It is photographed in the Carillion photography. So yes, we do know that we are energetic beings. If you will remember the wise words of Master Yoda, who said, if I can quote it correctly, "Luminescent beings are we, not this crude matter." Very true. Master Yoda is real, but not in the historical sense, but in the image in the mind, the imagination. We'll get to that in a minute. So energy is real. We are energetic beings. We live in an energetic universe. All these energies are overlapping us. And we believe that the scientific understanding underlying Rabbi Luzzatto's words, which in all due respect, though he wrote them in the 1700s, clearly are echoes of words of our sages in the Talmud that were written maybe 1,500 years earlier. Energy. We are energetic beings. We live in an energetic universe. And energies overlap, and energies interact, and energies influence one another. And the energies of the universe bombard our earth at all times and influence everything that happens here, including our human energy field, which is manifest in our consciousness, our feelings, and our thoughts. And this is exactly how the science of astrology operates. When our Earth rotates around the sun, sorry, or all apologies to you geocentrics out there, we are living in a heliocentric reality. Our Earth is rotating or revolving around the sun, and as it does, it comes into contact with and influence with other energetic patterns that are emanating from the stars that form some kind of juncture with our planet as it's orbiting the sun. These groups of stars, we've given names, we call them the zodiac. Now, you begin to understand Rosh HaShana. You see, when the earth passes through the beginning influence of the stars, which we call Libra, in Hebrew Moznaim, the scales. This is where balance and harmony is, if you will, at a tipping point. So therefore, where we are at energetically, as we enter into the Libra influence, interacts where we are, where Libra is, and literally projects a course over the entire next rotation of the earth around the sun, which has an influence over us at the individual level. Where we are at influences where we are going. Our sages perceived this astrological cosmic reality in Babylon, and were able to have the progressive revelation of recognizing that not only is the first day of the 7th month, coincidentally right around the time of the fall equinox, but it's also the beginning of this influence which influences the entire rest of the year. And as such, we call it the beginning of the year. But you notice the beginning of the year falls in the 7th month, right? Is that right? 7th month. What year? When does the year begin in month 7? That's like saying it doesn't make sense. It begins at number 1. It doesn't begin at 7. But yes, it does. Because beginning, it's a relative term. It's not a historical term. We use it as a calendar just to make it a number, but that's all it is. But the influences are real. Now, we as human beings are energetic entities. As energy entities, we are connected to and integrated with our greater reality around us. I have asked you all in the past, and I will reiterate again now, please. I don't like people to accept my word for anything. My opinion is what it is. I prefer to people study for themselves and see the facts and proofs as I have. I have asked you to go on to Amazon.com, please through KosherTorah.com, and find the DVD download of a television program called Through The Wormhole, Season 2, Episode 5, about the sixth sense. It shows you how telepathy and the psychic mind really works. They show you all the modern scientific foundations for this. And it's a 44-minute program. It'll cost you less than $2. It's well worth the investment of your time and $2. And I encourage you to please watch it. You will see the science is real. We are connected. We are interconnected. Our energies are not limited to the physical shell of our bodies. Our energies flow from us. Now, this becomes of significance in this respect, because this is how telepathy works. This is how mind-to-mind communication works. 1 second, please. Take a little sip of my tea here. Good ginseng tea. Perks you right up. Our souls are energy. Our minds are energy. Our reality is energy. Our thoughts are energy. Our emotions are energy. So now, when we want to connect to one another, we do so through energy. We understand the science of the influence of the cosmic fields and realms of Rosh HaShana. I believe we've been successful in explaining that, and I hope in brief and simplistic manner that you can walk away saying, got it. But now let's move on. Because for those of you who received the invitation to this live class, you know I presented it to you by saying I want to share and teach you a meditation. But a meditation, many people have the mistaken belief of thinking that it is something in your imagination, in the confines of the inner recesses of your mind, and there it stays. And therefore, in your mind, you can think of or believe whatever you want. And so what? Because it's not really having an influence in the outside world. Go watch the program from Through the Wormhole and you will see there is no such thing as thought not having an influence. Because even though we look at our minds as being closed inside the rock shell of our brains, it's not true. We have energy pipelines, energy cables coming out through, symbolically, the back of our energetic heads, which literally tap into and give access to and exit to all of our thoughts, all of our emotions. That's how auras and energies are sensed around. So therefore, whatever you imagine in your mind, however small or great, is never, ever, ever limited to the confines of your brain. On the contrary, like it says in the Talmud, Kol Yisrael aruvin ze leze. It's often mistranslated to state, all Israel are responsible for one another. But anyone who knows Hebrew knows the words aruvin does not mean responsible. It means interconnected. This is the great secret. We, as humanity, this is something that is discussed very deeply in the Kabbalah of the Ariel. We are all part of a collective Adamic supersoul. We are all part of a collective hive mind. We're unaware of it, disconnected from it, at least we think so. But yet through that back door of consciousness in the unconscious mind, we are all connected. And as such, each one of us has access to the collective consciousness. we have what it takes to influence all of humanity. Now this becomes important, because when we were discussing moments ago about the astrology, about the interaction of these energies, it sounds rather definitive. A closed system. Things work mechanically, and that's just the way it is. But Rabbi Luzzatto says something else. Again, this is from section 2, chapter 7, paragraph 3. He writes, every human being is also subjugated to this system. Whatever happens to him is a result of the astrological influence. However, listen to this. It also is possible that the stellar influence can be overridden by a higher power. The power of God's decrees and influences is stronger than that of the stars, and what results is therefore dependent on this higher influence rather than on the astrological. So while the mechanical operations of the universe are going to operate through the power of human consciousness, we have the power and the ability to manipulate, to influence, and to change energetically. That when we pass through the Libra influence, we are subtly shifting that energy from maybe a negative to a positive, from a small to a great, from a weak to a strong, from a sick to a healthy. We're not going to change the stars. No. That's not the way the system works. We literally circumvent. So let's, for example, if you will allow me the visualization, think of it as a ladder. You don't stand at the bottom of the ladder and climb all the way up to the top. No. On the contrary, you call on your cell phone from the bottom to the, allow me, man on top, and he sends it down the ladder. That's the energy connection. That's the way it works. That's why we have the ability to make change. In Hebrew, this is called teshuvah, returning to God. We think of ourselves as disconnected because we're not paying attention to the connection. But we are always connected. You can't be disconnected from the universe. You just can't be. Energetically. Doesn't matter if you're in the body or out of the body, which we call alive and dead. Energy is energy. You can't be disconnected. First law of thermodynamics. Energy is never destroyed or created. There's a universal constant. Energy fluctuates and changes form all the time, but it's energy. That's you. That's me. That's we. And we have access to influence, to change. That is our greatest gift and our greatest ability. So you see, long ago, when Israel inhabited the land, the days of Solomon and the first temple, Israel was then still an individual nation, involved in its own intrigue and affairs. But God had greater plans for His Israel. Israel was meant to and destined to be spread throughout the world, to become a light to the nations, like Isaiah said. And that started with the Assyrian exile and continued with the Babylonian exile. And to this day, the vast majority of Israel are scattered in every single nation around the world. And they have no idea of their Israelite origins. They're certainly not known today as Jews. They certainly have no Eastern European ethnic identity. And we refer to these as the lost tribes and the like. I guarantee that you will find the remnants of Israelites in Korea, Japan, China, India, Africa, Native Americans, South Americans, in the most faraway flung places. I guarantee you will find not only the bloodline, but the spirit line. And somebody says here in comment, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I'm sure there too. But that's just the nature of how God, universe, nature, the higher power, call it whatever, is evolving our planet. So everything is happening and everything is moving in a quantum state of flux, which you and I have the ability to influence. Now, a wee bit about politics, current events. We all know we're living in very, very difficult times. Literally, we are probably closer today to a World War III breaking out than we have been maybe in the last 60 years. We have terrible, terrible crimes against humanity going on. We have holocausts going on. We have everything going topsy-turvy and upside down. It wouldn't take much to tip the scales. But if those scales are, if you will allow me, meant to be tipped, then they will be. And if things are meant to happen, then they will. Can you and I as an individual change the course of the planet? Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. Why? Well, what about God's will? What about God's plan? Well, you want to know something? God's plan is rather quantum, fluctual in nature. God's plan is always subject to change. God's plan is always fluctuating. When God created Adam and Eve, do you think God said, okay, I'm going to create Adam and Eve, and yeah, I know they're going to sin, and then I know they're going to go with the golden calf, and then I know they're going to have to burn down the temple? No. God said those potentials exist in a quantum state of flux, but it doesn't have to be. The realities only materialize as we materialize them. What that means is that World War III does not have to happen. The apocalypse does not have to happen. Doom and gloom, destruction, fire and brimstone does not have to happen. Even though it's written in the prophets as we understand it, doesn't have to happen in the way that we think it needs to happen. That is the power of our quantum influence upon collective humanity and our interaction with the energetic powers of the universe. This is what we call teshuvah, returning to God. This is what we call tikkun, rectification. We have the power. We have the ability. And I'm going to teach you right now how to use it. Number one, you don't need to do long fasts. You don't need to give thousands of dollars to Tzadok, your favorite KosherTorah or any other kind. No. None of this nonsense. You don't have to be wearing white clothes. You don't have to shave your head. You don't have to go to the mikvah. You don't have to do any of these things unless any of these things have significance and meaning for you personally. If you feel that doing this or doing that is of value to you, do it. If you feel that wearing white clothes brings you closer to God, good for you. If you feel that going into the mikvah, which is the ritual immersion, and dunking 5 times or 50 times, that makes you feel closer to God, go dunk 500 times. I don't care. Whatever works for you. Because it's all in your mind. But your mind is not limited to that noggin, that coconut on your shoulders called your head. It's in your energy field. It's in your energy pattern. And like the famous Baal Shem Tov teaching from his book Sefer Baal Shem Tov, Amut HaTefillah section, Efo Adam Choshev Shamhu, where a man thinks is where he's at. Man, meaning male and female, please. So understand, if you don't have a mikvah, if you don't have white clothes, none of that matters. No, it doesn't. Because we're in the energetic influence. For those of you who are familiar with the martial arts and the Chinese system, As you know, I teach systems called Qi Gong, Ni Gong, similar related, Chinese, wherein which it's movement of the inner energies that make the martial arts work. And the first rule is that these energies are moved by the power of the mind. We make physical movements of the body so as to open up energy conduits in the body so that the powers of the mind and the energies therein can flow through them. Even Rabbi Chaim Vital writes about this clearly in his book Etz Chaim, Gate 50, Chapter 4. And he quotes about this energetic interaction with the fulfillment of the ritual commandments. And he takes it from what he calls the books of the healers. In those days, the Arabic books that he most likely had access to had Oriental sources. So now, everything is energy. Everything is by the power of your mind. So a mind meditation is a visualization and the construct of thought which you project out into the collective consciousness. This is the entire psychological foundation of how what we call the Kavanot of the Arizal school and later the Rosh HaShana school operate. It's about creating imagery and projecting that imagery out into the greater collective. The imagery does not have to be intensely complicated. On the contrary, it is better if the imagery is intensely simple. And that is what I want to share with you now. One of the jobs of the priests in the old temple of Jerusalem was to, as you know, bless the people. They were the conduits that brought the energy down to earth and spread it around for blessing. We're all very familiar with the words of the Aaronic blessing found in Numbers chapter 6, right? Yivarechecha HaShem v'yishamarecha. Blessing. The word beracha is the Hebrew word for expanding energetic radiance of the power of life. The power of life is represented by God's name YHWH, which means being. So therefore, when we meditate upon and visualize God's name, specifically the name YHWH, this itself is a symbol, a representative symbol that has the metaphorical expression of representing the life force energy of the universe. And many people still want to personify God as some kind of person. He's our Father. He's our King. After all, isn't that how we refer to God in our prayers on Rosh HaShana? But God isn't a person. God is the energy, the consciousness of existence. Our sages recognized that the average person could not deal with such a grandiose concept and simplified it. They say, well, if you can't think of God in that abstract way, well, think of him kind of like a king. You all know the king. You don't mess with the king's laws. Mess with the king's laws, the king's soldiers come and they chop your head off. Well, God's your king. You don't mess with his laws or yada, yada, yada. And therefore the mythology developed over centuries to call God our Father, our King. This is following the biblical pattern. But this is such an antiquated way of understanding the old and real truths. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as we recognize its limitation. Because in all due respect, the point that Rabbi Chaim Vital makes very clearly in his book Sha'arei Kedusha, section 3, chapter 1, that God's name, YHWH, is not the true essence of God. It itself is only a vessel, a vehicle, through which the unknowable essence of God, which we call in Kabbalah the Ein Sof, can materialize. That's why the name YHWH isn't really a name. It's not even a title. it's more like an adjective than it is a noun. It's a description of the active being of existence. Where is it? So it's everywhere, of course. It's in every single cell in our body. It's within every single atom, within every single subatomic particle. So in essence, we're not really ever far from God, other than in our minds. So that if we want to bring this into the forefront of mind, Avraham Abulafia, in his book Sefer HaCheshek, actually has a very interesting little construct of how to do it. And it says here, Hahelik Bet Katan, Simano Bet, page 24, Kaf Dalet in the modern version. He says that a person should contemplate seeing as if you have a person standing in front of you, waiting for you and him to talk, and waiting for you to ask a question, waiting for you to speak and he's going to answer. And this is what he encourages you to do. He tells you, create an inner dialogue. Now you and I might say, well, it's all in my imagination. I'm making it up as I go along. Probably true. But this concept, as discussed here in Abulafia, you will find it's discussed later in Jungian psychology, and it's referred to there as active imagination, wherein which we're using the power of the mind as a proper energy to transform realities. So, for example, one of the active imagination exercises is if and when a person has some kind of frightening image that pops up in their mind, rather than try to beat it down, destroy it, burn it with fire and everything else, on the contrary, embrace it, shine light on it, heal it, embrace it with love, and turn darkness into light, turn evil into good. This is what we call the rising up of the sparks of holiness, Aliyat Rafach. This is what we call the Tikkun HaNetzotzot, the raising up or the rectification of the sparks. This is how we deal with everything. For those of you who are familiar with our exorcism technique, this is how you deal with the earthbound souls. You don't torment them and cast them into hell. On the contrary, you heal them. You force them to stay in the body of the person who they are inflicting, so that you can have them and heal them, so that they can move on in their evolutionary track. Everything that we do is all about healing. This is in Hebrew called beracha, blessing. This is the job of the Kohen priest. And guess who the Kohen priest is today? Granted, if the temple in Jerusalem stood, we needed physical priests. We're talking about the bloodline of Aaron. No one argues that. But energetically, we're not limited to bloodline. Energetically, anyone who wants to rise up to perform the function of a Kohen, to become a conduit of blessing, can do so. How? Very simple. This is your technique. This is your meditation for Rosh HaShana and for all the world, all the year. We start real simple. Visualize God's name. Yud, K, Vav, K. For those of you who are in this live class, you'll see the image in front of you on your screens. For those of you who received the invitation, if you're on our KosherTorah.com mailing list, you will have received this name as an image. The vowels of the name are simple. Yud is with what we call shva. That's the two dots up and down. The Hey is with the kamatz, that's like a little T shape. The Vav is with the three dots called the segol. The Hey again is with the kamatz, like a little T shape. What that is the vowels of the Hebrew word from Numbers chapter 6, the first word of the blessing, Yivarechecha. There's actually one extra vowel and then one extra shva towards the end. But I left that out because we only have 4 letters. That was a 5-letter or 5-vowel thing. And shva, for those of you who know, corresponds to gevura. So the gevura at the end we could leave out. You don't recite this name. There's no magic in it. You can take the letters and recite it all you want. Hocus pocus abracadabra. Sorry, this is not Harry Potter. This is not magic poof poof. This is what the Chinese would call Shen Gong, mind movement of energy. God's name is the conduit of energy. The vowels under God's name here represent the blessing that the priest in the temple would give. Concept. All the vowels and the letters are just symbolic representatives of the concept. Forget the letters, forget the vowels, and remember the concept. God is blessing. That's the concept. And all you have to do, using this symbol of this name and these letters or not, in the privacy of your own place. Go to a place where you can have silence and quiet of mind. Take your hands. Place them out in front of your body. If you know how to do these movements of the fingers, which you can make what's called the Aaronic blessing with your hands. That's kind of like what Leonard Nimoy did in the Spock character, live long and prosper kind of thing. You go online and look for the Aaronic blessing of the moving of the fingers, right? 2 and 2 and thumbs. Place your hands out, your palms straight out in front of you. Visualize God's name with these vowels as the source and conduit, like a pipe of blessing. And the pipeline is open, and it's pouring down energy straight into the top of your head, filling your body, and literally flowing out of your hands, like shooting beams of energy out into the ethers, out into the universe. And your mind is open with a simple thought. God, may I be as your priest in the holy temple, to be a conduit of blessing. Take me out of the equation and work through me, and let my body and my mind serve as a vehicle for projecting your positive energy into the collective consciousness of humanity and into the universe for good. And the more you can visualize God's name, recognizing the symbolic meaning of that being the energy of the divine light, with these vowels, which again are a symbolic representation of the blessing, you just project that out, say whatever words in your mind that you want. Visualize beams of light energizing, coming out from your hands, going out into the universe. Going out where? Nowhere in particular. Don't project it into the Middle East, into America, into your whatever other country. No. Project it generically. Why? Because God knows where the energy needs to go. God knows who is sick and needs to be healed. God knows who is weak and needs to be strong. God knows who is poor and needs to be rich. God knows it all. You and I, what do we know? Think about it. What do we really know? We know what we believe. We know what we think. But the thoughts of our humanity are rather limiting. And therefore, all that we can think about where to project energy is limited. And energy does not necessarily need to go where we think. So don't lock yourself into a rigid reality, saying here the energy goes there. No, just generically out into the universe. Project it out and let God's energy go where it will, as it must. This is a great and powerful meditation that each and every one of us can do. You don't necessarily need to be saying any kind of words. You don't need to know Hebrew. If you can visualize this name and the vowels, which remember is only a metaphor, it's symbolic. Don't try to pronounce the letters with the vowels. That's not what you're doing. You're missing the point. This is not a name. This is not anything. It is like a mathematical symbol. It's like if I put a symbol for pi, right? It is not in and of itself the symbol. It's what the symbol represents. Like the old Buddhist saying is, don't mistake the finger for the moon. Don't mistake the symbol for what it represents. Please, this is important. And don't think that the power of your mind is limited into that coconut of your brain. Oh, it's all in my head. Of course it's all in your head. Everything's in your head. Energy is energy. Energy's in your brain. It's in your head. But that energy is not limited because the pipelines come out into the collective consciousness. So therefore, you open yourself up and your mentality is simple. God, I am your pipeline. I am your conduit. And it's good that you can put your hands out physically. Act something out. Yeah, act the part. Acting the part's always good because it makes you feel like you're doing something. And that's part of the energy. And visualize your hands projecting energy. There are those who actually practice this to such great levels that they can project actual energy, actual electromagnetic energy out of their hands, out of their bodies. Buddhist priests are renowned for doing this. The late Rav Kaduri also was very famous for being able to do this. It's not necessarily anything holy or unclean, but rather it's bioelectric energy. And every single human being, that means you, can do this. It takes practice. So I'm asked the question, why do the Kohanim put their fingers up that way? It's a matter of the projection of energy. That's just what it is. So ultimately, we use the archetype, which is the metaphorical symbol of putting the hands in the Aaronic way, because that means something to us. If it doesn't mean anything to you, then just stretch your fingers out. It doesn't matter. But project the energy, visualize it going from God above, through your body, out your hands, into the generic universe, going wherever it is needed. And as we now pass through Libra, that energy of Libra passes through us. And as we are a conduit, that makes us an open vessel. And there is nothing that gets blessing more than an open vessel. So you want to know how you yourselves receive blessings for this coming year? Become a conduit of blessing. Don't seek to receive a blessing for your own sake. Dear God, gimme, 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 amen. No, due respect. God is not Santa Claus. Rosh HaShana is not Christmas. Don't stand in front of God in some fancy metaphor. Oh God, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. God says, well, I'll forgive you. But only if you promise to be a good boy or a good girl. Come on. Let's put the fantasy beside. People will go these high holidays and spend hours and hours and hours of prayer. And I asked a very dear friend of mine today, who goes to a very large synagogue, and I asked him, of all the people who go to your synagogue, and you've been going to synagogue for literally decades, generations even, what percentage of the people would you say are in the synagogue truly, sincerely devout, praying from the beginning of the service to the end? He chuckled, and he says, absolutely 100% nobody. and he goes to a very strict Orthodox synagogue. That's the reality of people who don't understand energy. We create our own negative energy, and therefore we can turn it into positive energy. I can't tell you about the future of the world, but I can tell you, you have the power to influence it. Do you have the power to change it? That I don't know. I don't know how strong you or I are, but I will tell you this. If we work together to be conduits to project the positive, radiant energy of the divine into this universe, to bring about positive change, to elevate the fallen, to shine light into the darkness, we can create subtle influence of change in the unconscious minds of individuals around the world in ways and means that we cannot even possibly begin to imagine, because we have access to them. We have a voice that can speak into their ears, and that voice is not one of audible sound, but of psychic sound. The difference between what we call in Kabbalah the voice and the speech. We discussed that in our Hesed LaAvraham series in the Secrets of Prophecy. We can make a difference. And now, at this juncture of Rosh HaShana, that's what we do. The great archetypal symbol of influencing the collective, of course, is the blast of the shofar. The shofar blast, according to the Kabbalah and the Zoharic teachings, the one who blows the shofar has to have that opening in the conduit of his own mind. And he projects the energy and the divine light through the actual blast of the shofar. And it's the sound emanating from the ram's horn, which is literally supposed to shake your bones and to receive the telepathic intent from the one who is blowing the shofar. Therefore, if the one who blows the shofar does not have the telepathic intent to project, then there is no one there to receive the telepathic message. And that is why in the Zoharic tradition, it is very important that the one who blows the shofar be of the proper, what we call, mindset. Today, almost no one is of that mindset. So, nothing to worry about unless you know how to blow the shofar yourself, and if you can, I would recommend it. And have in mind being the Kohen, the conduit, that when you blow the voice, no words, just sound, that you are radiating a telepathic energy that is going to radiate through the sonic blast of the sound and go far beyond that and circle the globe. And that sonic, psychic sound will be heard within the unconscious ear, everywhere, from all who want to hear it, all who are able to hear it. And even those who don't want to hear it, and who can't hear it, they have cables into the back of their brains just like we do. And they can be influenced just like we can influence. This is all it takes. You don't need anything greater. You don't need anything deeper. You don't need anything more technical or confusing. If you can accomplish this, you will have accomplished a great deal and a great deed. You will become a conduit of blessing and therefore a receptacle of blessing. And that is how it is done. That is your meditation for this Rosh HaShana. I want to thank you all again for joining me. I want to thank my regular contributors for their support for the year. And I pray that I will be here for you and you for me in this next year. I want to bless you all, that God should be our protector. God should be our healer. God should be our provider. And that each and every one of us should be a conduit to be protection and a healing and a prosperity blessing to everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, Ariel Bar Tzadok from KosherTorah.com. Thank you all for joining me as we say L'Shana Tova, that everyone should have a happy, healthy, prosperous, blessed New Year. Thank you again all for joining me. I'll see you all next year. Shana Tova, Shalom. 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 Shana Tova,